I think every country has its own obligations as a nation to, work towards the well-being or the economic development of its own citizens. Kenya government, as you know, has for a long time supported farmers, particularly in the staple foods like maize, specifically with various interventions, including subsidies like fertilizer and so forth. And I think the reason was to discourage imports and try and get the farmers to make livelihoods out of their crops. It's not just in maize, even in sugar. But where then production, or for example, is not adequate, like in the case of sugar, the government has always sought, the support of its other countries to allow them to fill the gap. And so forth. But let me tell you, the issue of maize really has been dealt with for a very long time by governments. When President Kibaki came in, he talked about, you remember that strategy on revitalization of agriculture. They tried to review the entire legal environment to try and introduce some of the policies that discourage farmers and so forth, try to liberalize as much as possible. You now see what's happening in the tea sector, in the coffee sector, the government trying to do everything to try and encourage that competitiveness so that really we can compete out there in the market. But the challenges are there. Everything is different in every country. The cost of land in this country, for example, the price of land, you can't compare with the countries in the region. The cost of inputs, cost of living, from country to country varies. The cost of labor in Kenya cannot be compared to the cost of labor in some of the other countries. So definitely then the cost of production seems to be higher, and I think these are some of the challenges. But there are, ways in which these things can be addressed if both the government and farmers themselves really looked at it. For example, one of the things that we have, if you look at Rwanda, if you've been to Rwanda, you'll find there's a distinction between the way the farmers in Kenya and Uganda, use their land. In Kenya, the lands have been subdivided into very small units, and as the family grows, it goes on being subdivided, and people live on the farms. The houses are built there. You find it's different in Tanzania, in Uganda, where people have settlements where their homes are in the settlements, and the farm and the rest of the farm is just meant for farming. So I think it's time that we looked at our farming practices in general, plus of course address some of the challenges that contribute to the high cost of production, not just in maize, but I think across. Otherwise, on the mobility of assets, I think some of the key challenges really in integration is about mobility, whether it's of people or not just goods, but even of people. I think these are some of the areas that are a bit sensitive in terms of security and so forth. So I think that is an area that takes quite a bit of time to get that confidence really in a regional setup like this one. Yeah.
So as it is, then there are a lot of cons than pros in terms of getting assets in between the EAC. All right. So, Mark Chiti, together you have your answer. Keep sending your questions. I can see there are some other questions. We'll get back to them so that we don't lose track of our thoughts on the conversations. Now, IEA keeps reading reports and announcing reports that the economy is growing. KWAME OWINO comes on TV screens and tells us confidently the economy is growing at 7%. And the villager is barefoot in the village, has not taken food for 3 days. Who owns the economy? When you talk about the economy, you had the president the other day saying that he has grown the economy multiple times more than his predecessors. And when you look at the cost of living from the guys he's mentioning, we say Moi was corrupt, but hizo masiku ulikuwa unaokotanga hata kidogo 50 so tano thou. These days hata uwezi okota, yani ile kitu unaweza okota ni masaibu. And the president has been saying that the economy has been growing over time. So who owns the economy? When KWAME, when you tell us the economy is growing, what are you usually referring to? Who owns the economy? As we speak, we are saying the economy has grown, but it looks like the common mwananchi is continuing to have a problem in terms of affording basic needs.
Okay. Well, very rarely do I come on because it's I work at the IE and we don't do public relations for government. So very rarely do I come to say that the economy is.
That was just
I know. But the point is
that was to make it to give it a visual.
But the point is that And if you look at the way it is measured, yes, I mean, throughout the Jubilee season, with the exception of last year because of COVID and other things, it didn't, the growth wasn't very high. But the point you're asking is, what type of growth did we have? And so one of the things that the Jubilee administration did was specifically building these big infrastructure projects. So borrowed money and then built trains, built big roads, built a few things. And of course, the president said that at the same time, people stole 2 billion per day. So that's part of the reason why, while on the one side, there's a registered growth in terms of the numbers, what the numbers suggest, people didn't see as much effect on their livelihoods. And I think that's a real one. So people feel that. And the economy is not some box that the Treasury stars. The economy is just basically the daily interactions that each of us undertake as we try to live our lives. So basically, you have some piece of land, you know that the planting season is coming, you go and buy some seedlings, you come and plant, you pay your laborers, you wait for the rains, or you irrigate, you weed, and you do that. So basically, as you operate your life in terms of trying to live your life and obviously manage your finances, that's what at the huge scale, that's what the total of the economy is. But most of us are doing that on a day-to-day basis. So it doesn't even belong to government, actually. Economies exist because all of us have the urge to wake up in the morning and do some work that is of value, and that value obviously generates income for everybody, and for us, so that we can pay we can live lives that are of dignity. So that's it. So it's true that the rhetoric around growth on the part of the Jubilee administration and the feeling qua ground among people is completely in diverse sense. And I think one of the things that the Jubilee administration did was they forgot that people have to feel it. So a lot of PR and a lot of people from social media, all those guys were now very disillusioned and claiming that all along they've been against it, were just talking up the economy when the real things were not happening. So yes, you're right, that the Kenyans who work and who have small businesses and big businesses, some of them actually supplied products to government, and there are people who've not been paid for 2 years. So any business that has actually supplied products and you haven't been paid for 2 years, and maybe you are funding it through a banking facility, of course you're in trouble. So all that at large scale has generated the kind of disillusionment that we see. But more importantly, if you put all these things together, one of the things for which President Uhuru says that he's grown the economy by a huge scale, well, he's also left Kenyans, he's going to leave Kenyans with a lot of debt. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. So that must also be. So if you're funding an artificial growth with debt and leaving the country with debt that is growing every year. So when President Uhuru came in, the national debt was being paid at the rate of every year at about less than 1 billion shillings per day. Today it's 3 billion shillings per day. So obviously there's something to be said for the way the Jubilee administration has its stewardship of the economy, and it's been very poor. So I've taught basic economics at undergraduate level for children, for university students. And if I was to mark their scorecard, I'd actually give them a D, to be honest. I'd give them a D, yes.
For me, the growth of an economy for me should mean money in the pocket. Money in the pocket of the citizens. That is a reflection of an economy that is growing. The fact that if I can afford bread, that means the economy is growing. But if I cannot afford it, then the practicality of a growing economy then stops to make sense. Is it possible for an economy to grow, and then again the people who thrive in the same economy cannot afford basic life?
Yes, that's what we have. The government is even projecting now that this year, 2021, it will grow by over 6%.
They're already growing it in advance.
And so...
And this guy is telling us it's not a box where they chokora. It looks like it is a box where they chokora.
Yes, the disconnect is in the... ours is largely a subsistence economy. 80% of Kenyans, they survive on the informal sector. The agriculture sector being the largest. What we call the formal sector is really very small, pretty small, and this is where the data, most of the data comes in from. The manufacturing sector, the retail, the businesses, the financial sector. These are the what I sometimes call the elitist, sectors of the economy. Those are the ones that contribute to all this growth, infrastructure, those huge projects, So, but to the 80% of the Kenyans who survive on the, they don't see the trickle-down effect is minimal. It's not there. And this is why we've always urged the government, leave the money in the pockets of Kenyans. Don't tax. The perception that government must always tax is wrong. Tax should not be a burden on society. It's not a must for the government to say, look, I must do this road and I must build this way. No, it's up to the people. People also need to have money in their pockets to live their lives. So you don't have to tax people in order to do the things that you think are important. And this is what we are seeing in this government. The government says we want to leave a legacy, we want to do this. It's not about what you want. And I think this, unfortunately, is what is contributing to some of the and this is what you would call during the time of Reagan, they were calling voodoo economics. The taxes you collect are going down, but your expenditures are expanding. You are now, even in crisis like now when we have this pandemic, you would expect government to rationalize its expenditure and, it should go down this year. But you find them expanding, 3.3 trillion, it's just increasing. And they know revenues are going down, the situation is bad, and there are challenges in the... So, and so I think this unfortunately is about the government's own, the policies that they have in place, and they want, so which is not necessarily right. And this is why we said it's their performance, really, their stewardship of the economy is pretty bad.
All right, that's some voodoo economics. That's a new one. Anyway, since you've already mentioned, you've dropped something about the tax, about taxation. KRA seems to be every day on an aggressive front to tax Kenyans. Is there a country in history which has ever taxed itself to prosperity? A country that has ever pickpocketed itself to prosperity?
Obviously not. I actually have a different view about that. Because you remember the Kenya Revenue Authority is just your administrator of the tax collection system. Yeah. The institution that's empowered by law to create taxes is Parliament. Yes. And
so KRA is overstepping its mandate?
No, it isn't. I mean, it's just doing the work that Parliament... KRA cannot collect a shilling from us on this bottle of water if Parliament didn't allow it. And if they tried it, obviously you'd go to court and the tribunal would say they don't have that power. So one of the things that Parliament did, and I think, yes, as we talk about the Jubilee administration, it wasn't helped by a Parliament that was too compliant, did not perform its role very well, and every time they were told, we are building a road, they were just too eager to let taxes be raised, or tax rates be raised in the belief that they were building, or they were helping to create development, whatever that means. So we have a Parliament that every single year new taxes are introduced, and so for instance one tax is brought in. So for instance in the last 6 years, slightly longer, we've had this minimum tax introduced and taken back and introduced and taken back, and it's been introduced again. So Parliament never sits back, and we have a finance committee of Parliament, never sits back and asks the Treasury Secretary, okay, what is it that you're trying to do with this tax? Because a few years back you convinced us to bring it in, then it did not work, we took it out. We brought it in, you took it out, and then again this year from the 1st of January it's supposed to be happening. What is it that you're trying to do before we pass this law and allow the KRA to start raising taxes? So for Kenyans, it looks as if the idea of funding government operations is no longer in the control of Parliament. It is just what somebody at the KRA and somebody in the executive, thinks wants to work. They put it in a bill, and Parliament.
So we want some money. Go and tax bread.
Yes. So the media tax. The digital tax. So the point we need to ask ourselves is, Parliament, those taxes can't pass without Parliament passing a law. So does Parliament ever ask itself, look, fine, it's okay for you to say that we need new taxes, but when you're talking about a media or a minimum tax, what are we trying to achieve? Are we just trying to get more money? Or are we just trying to chase every single shilling? Because what does it mean for Kenyans if you're going to tell people the minimum tax, if you're going to tell people that you pay a tax on your turnover irrespective of whether you are making profits or not. In other words, you are taxing people's capital. Is that what you want us to do? But Parliament passes it and then comes back on the podiums and they start telling you that Jubilee has failed. And that, I'm not talking about parliaments from both sides, including Jubilee MPs. So the game here is that Parliament allows the Treasury and the administration to do whatever they want, and then they come back here and try to play as if they are victims, like everybody else. So that's the problem. So I am hesitant to blame the KRA for the faults of Parliament, which is supposed to be sitting there reading laws and passing them, and then later claiming that they did not know that that is the effect that those taxes would have. So that's the unfortunate situation that we are in. A Parliament that actually has forgotten what its real roles are, which is oversight over every new tax that the administration wants to introduce.
So it's now in bed with the executive. So your thoughts on the same thing: the aggressive tax collection on incomes by KRA, and also should the revenue collection be measured against GDP?
I think one of I think the last couple of days I've read a statement by the majority leader in Parliament saying that, look, Treasury can come with their, I'm sure we'll discuss about that later. We can come with their, proposal to increase the ceiling for debt. If they want to even to 20 trillion, we will sign it. The only thing we want to know is that they should use the money for development. I mean, that's the kind of people we're having today. It doesn't look at any other aspect of the economy, whether the sustainability of the debt. That's not his concern. His concern is that the government says we will use it for this. Say, fine, let's go. And if the government doesn't use it, it doesn't bother, because nobody is holding the government to account in terms of its expenditures. When the budget comes up for review, nobody says, let us look at the budget. What happened the last one? How did you spend it? And I think so. The challenge we have today is not just on the revenue; it's on the expenditure. Really, revenue it's not. If you look at the revenue performance in this country, is better than probably all of the other members of EAC combined. The issue is on the expenditure. So KRA is being put on and necessarily, a lot of pressure to try and generate revenue every which way they can. This is why you see them taxing capital through the turnover and all manner of taxes, really. So unless the government learns to rationalize its expenditure, even in this crisis, today you would expect, because of the crisis we have, the pandemic, the people have lost, thousands of people have lost their jobs, incomes have disappeared. People who have been doing some small exports are unable to do because of the lockdowns in many parts of the world. There are many challenges. But so you would think the government would really, provide some relief, let alone taxing, or, should provide or increase. That's what's happening all over the world. Governments are assisting businesses and, their citizens to try and avoid payment of taxes so that people can bring up their businesses back, create more opportunities, more investments, more jobs, and so forth. But unfortunately, because the focus here is always on expenditure, then KRA then is left to try and find money every which way they can, and this is the challenge. So it's not about revenue in relation to the GDP or whatever. It's simply that the government is looking at the wrong end of the stick. They should be concerned about the expenditures, really the ballooning expenditure, and the government can rationalize expenditure. By the way, there are a lot of, if you go through government estimates, you find there's just so much, it's padded with so much that they can actually, because today in a crisis, you find last year in the middle of the crisis, when you have no money to help the health sector, the allowances for or equipment for the medical workers, you find a government ministry is advertising, putting up an office, another one is doing, some mundane activity, which is not essential. You can put back, you can delay some of these things because of the crisis. But, that lack of prioritization, it is a major issue in government in this country. We've always wanted that conspicuous consumption culture. You want to, government, every ministry or state corporation wants to be seen to be doing something. And this is the thing, and this is the challenge that we've had. And I believe it's worsened, really. It did not get better.
All right. Well, KRA was being restructured some times back when it comes up with the iTax and all that. There came a slogan, Tulipa Ushuru Tujitegemee, which was a call of public good. Like, you don't want us to make us feel good about paying taxes. But again, there's been a feeling over time that KRA has been weaponized and, you know, used as a criminal system, a criminal justice system, where when BILLOW says something against the government, we send you KRA, you know, to come and say, now even the ugali you had yesterday should have left 10% for the government. I mean, what does this mean? Because again, paying taxes should be a patriotic role, where I feel good paying taxes. I wake up in the morning, I'm like, okay, today I have to pay ushuru, because it feels good to be a patriot. But again, there seems to be a pad here where the government, the executive is using KRA to use it as a criminal justice system to pursue people that they feel they are not satisfied with. What does this mean, you know, for the economy? Because this is an harm that actually is supposed to spur the economic growth by picking up money.
Yeah, I think that's the unfortunate part. That it's very, very unfortunate that, and that's not true. It's not just speculative. It's true. I mean, there are many people who receive certain audits just because you either made comments or you disagreed or you do not support a certain party. So this, and that's the unfortunate thing, because one of the things that I think we need to be careful about as Kenyans is people who are in leadership might have political problems with their opponents, but weaponizing institutions of the state is always a losing proposition. Because the moment you make every Kenyan understand that the revenue authority itself is performing a political role, a partisan political role, and not necessarily a national one, its credibility is damaged. On both sides, basically, people start to believe that you actually use that. So when you see them, or when you have the opportunity to, it's actually dangerous. And it's something I think that Jubilee has pushed, or this administration has pushed to a level where it's very, very clear. It's unfortunate because even for the Kenya Revenue Authority itself, which has professionals, they should understand that what that means is that they're damaging their own credibility. And for a tax system, remember, we have 2.9 million people who are on a payroll. Of that 2.9 million people, there's another 15 million who work in different enterprises, in small and micro enterprises in one form. Some are farmers and traders and everything else. It is not possible in any country to establish a tax system that can actually go to every single person. What that means is that a good relations between the Revenue Authority and a Kenyan, for people to have confidence in self-declaration and compliance, is essential. But when you damage it to solve a political, for political exigency, to show people that, look, we can actually use the revenue service to oppress you.
Clamp you down.
I don't know if that is that is a decision of a responsible person who actually understands how governments and statecraft should be done. So yes, it's unfortunate that it's damaging the credibility of an institution that is so important for the operations government, and it's also damaging its professional outlook, because it now looks like they are political hatchetmen. You basically sent to you when you said something, or when you disagree, or when it is intended for your business to be damaged, so that your livelihood is lost. I think it's a really, really dangerous thing, and it's something. If it was up to, that Parliament should have taken to itself and told the executive, look, let's agree to some of the rules that the functions of audits, and audits must be performed, should be independent of political yes. Because if you make the leadership of the revenue service in any country look like they perform a political role, then I think you've damaged it. And one of the things that many people don't understand is part of the reason even Kenyans have very low trust of the National Police Service, of the National Police Service, for instance. I think it's happening to the Revenue Service now, and many functions, the provincial administration, is some things that happened 30, 40 years ago. It takes a very long time for a state to recover credibility for its core offices if some of those things happen. And I think it's also happening now, unfortunately, with Parliament itself damaging its own reputation in that way. So that's the unfortunate thing. It should not happen, but yes, I think it's happened too many times, and I don't know if people understand what they're doing. Yeah.
All right, as you pick it from there, your comments on that we've been on as well, Mheshimiwa, and then you pick on, there seems to be a very thin line between SMEs and the other sectors in terms of taxation. Looks like we impose the same tax I'm imposing on KWAME on you. You are a big boy in the field, but again, I tax you the same way I'm taxing this guy. Should we have a different regime for SMEs and you know, and the bigger companies, and also maybe multinationals? Your comments on criminalization of the KRA system, revenue collection, and as you pick that as well as we close on KRA and taxes.
Yeah, I think I share the same sentiments with KWAME. I was in audit practice, and I know, I mean, I've seen a practical example in 2019 with one of our friends who ended up before the KRA investigation department. And so the auditors were trying to, you know, get the department to provide the details on your audit query so that the client can give the information and so forth. But I remember the officers were more concerned with placing him under arrest, and told them, look, you guys are interested in the money. He's not refusing to pay. Just give him the documents and he wants to pay. He said, no, we have a target of X number of people will be arrested and charged. And and in a few minutes they said, okay, we're not going further. And in the audit meeting, we had DCI officers. Oh, you know,
In an audit meeting?
Yes. And so the officers went out and they said, the officer from DCI said, now, gentlemen, you can leave. And the KRA guys were told to leave, and they took over. And they said, okay, we are placing you under arrest. And we pleaded with them and told them, these guys are not objecting to payment. Just give them the information. They said, no, we have to go to court. That's our mandate. So I think generally, and I think a few months later, the president himself really one time, I think, cautioned KRA from, you know, trying to use force. You remember, he warned them that people will start jumping out of windows if you start using, you know, behaving like a police force. But the circumstances are that have changed since, and I think in the last 1 or 2 years you've seen the way the department has been used, and with allegations of harassment of political opponents. Now on the SMEs, you know, if you've been around long enough, the way some of us have been in this country, you know, government has always talked nicely about going to support SMEs. That's what it has always been. Very flowery language in every budget. SMEs, we're going to look after you. But you go to Gikomba, it's the same Gikomba that I have seen when I first came to Nairobi in 70s. Not much has changed, not even a shade of where they make those wheelbarrows and those things. Many shades.
Many same shades.
So it's only this year that they have said, okay, we're going to set up a credit guarantee scheme, and we're waiting for it to, to be implemented, as the British say. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. We'll see how it's going to work. But I agree with you. There should be a different taxation regime. Really, there's nothing in law or in any practice. It's a good practice in other countries that you must encourage. That's why our SMEs never grow. It's always been around 80% of our businesses are SMEs, with millions of them coming up and collapsing after 1 year or 2 years of being in business. So I think it's true. And let me give you an example, for instance, not just in taxation regime, but I think in taxation, of course, the most important thing is KRA seems to have really downplayed one of its key roles, which is facilitative. They're focusing always on regulatory aspect. If you look at KRA charter, it's not just about regulation. It's about facilitating businesses. This is the cow that gives you the milk. You need to give opportunities. You need to create incentives and so forth. But instead, you'll find lately, they're actually going the opposite. They're fighting, they're removing every incentive, including even for big companies. Now, the capital allowances and, investments has become a problem. Now, when you come to, I want to give you another example, for example, in the banking sector. Because one of the challenges in our SMEs is access to credit. And so I've always, and this I've raised even with Central Bank when I was chair of finance in Senate, really, and they don't seem to be keen. One of the things that the central bank should be doing is to also help businesses, not just look after regulatory aspects of banks. So there's nothing in law that can stop central bank from saying, okay, banks, I'm not giving you a license this year unless you allocate 30% of your money to SMEs credit. 30% of your credit must go. Find out how you're going to do it. You know, and you must. So, you know, if you can't meet that, sorry, then I can't give you a license. This is business. There are risks in every business. You don't have to shield banks alone. You have, you know, every business has a risk. Yeah. So if they have to take risks, they have to take risks, but they must support that part of the economy, which is the main backbone of Kenyans. But the government is always supporting the opposite. The banks, and you find that then, so you know, they are not reliable. They are going to default, and you know, that's the focus always. You know, the banks are suffering from huge portfolio of bad loans, and this is why the credit guarantee scheme is coming in. If the government is concerned about that, then they need to come in and actually provide that credit guarantee in a big way so that our businesses can survive. There's no loss. You know, government always looks at things. It's like every penny that is spent on you, if it's not repaid for one way or the other, they consider it as a loss. It's not. Why must the government always think of it as a loss? The other day, the CS Treasury was saying that, you know, in the 6 months that they created those they gave the waive on taxes. You remember those taxes? They reduced the corporation tax to 25%, and part of the payers you earn and so forth. They said we lost over 172 billion. He was pained by that. We've lost revenue. Why do you talk of losing? This is money you left in the pocket of Kenyans, so that you are creating incomes. So I think it's the government needs to really look at our constitution. Really, if you look at the public finance chapter and some of the principles, tax should not be a burden. It should not be a burden, really. And government needs to look at the fact that if you need to leave people to decide to have some money in their pockets and decide to, because you need to support economies, you need to support livelihoods. People have got schools to pay. People have got other needs. You must not collect money because you want to achieve a particular project that you must do. No.
You can actually wait to collect money at the end, where it's coming from. Now, the government calls it losing when we don't give them, you know, but they don't count it losing when we give them, because we're also losing money. If I'm giving money to the government, I'm losing part of my income. If I'm giving you 16%, I'm losing 16% of my income. But when I don't give this government my earnings, they say they have lost money. Money which they never had. Anyway, from the word go, they have not worked for it. Anyway, should we draw the line between, is it fair to tax MSMEs the same way we tax all these big boys in the market? Should we create a different regime?
Well, no, obviously not, because the kind of SMEs that we have of a different kind. So basically, most SMEs tend to be 1-2 people, at the most 3. They tend to be small farms. So you cannot add to them the cost, say, for instance, or taxes must be collected, but you have to be careful that you're not adding to them the cost where they'll need a separate accounting department, a tax person to help them with planning and do that. So the way we arrange, that's one of the main problems that I have with the KRA, because they do the administration. The taxation system and the administration of the compliance system is built as if Kenya was Switzerland or the US, where every single business has some accountant. You have some software that helps you to aggregate your incomes, so that at the end of the month you actually can calculate specifically how much is owed. So if you introduce a system that's very burdensome administratively for somebody who's managing sales, say, and selling off their own premises at home, for instance, then obviously that makes it difficult for them to comply, and you actually raise unnecessarily. You distort the economics of the enterprise, because they have to spend so much time to ensure that they're in full compliance and do all that. So the paperwork definitely needs to be reduced. So let's, for everybody, but also specifically for SMEs. So for instance, last year we just tried to ask ourselves the tax code, basically all the taxes in Kenya. And we found out that if you put all the taxes in Kenya in a single document, it's something like 1,200 pages, 1,200 pages. The income tax itself is about 600 pages. So I keep asking Parliament, why are you continuing to make this tax system increasingly complicated? And then you go back to your people and tell them that we are trying to make a less burdensome tax system for you. I mean, why can't the tax system, like the one in Hong Kong, 10 pages, 10 pages, and it's not supposed to go, that's all. so that you can sit at a go and actually read the entire thing. So every time you hear Kenyans say, we are looking at the East Asian tigers, but you're looking at the East Asian tigers thinking that the way you get to East Asian tigers is to build big bridges and highways. But the way they manage businesses and make sure businesses continue to thrive is not something that bothers us. All we want to do is big engineering projects, of course, which also generate a lot of kickbacks for people, to be honest. But we are not looking at the practices that there's no reason why the tax system, you can keep the tax rates the same, but there's no reason why the tax system should require so many documents in order to comply. There isn't. So it is possible. It is possible. And that's why you have very educated people in the tax administration. I don't know why a parliament cannot ask them, for every tax head that you have, why can't you reduce this thing to at most 10 pages that somebody needs to read without shifting your tax rates, because they're more interested in VAT can remain at 16% as we did. But how can we make sure that a person who wants to comply only reads 10 pages and is able to answer all your questions in a day or two? So obviously that complicated tax system means that for a small and micro enterprise, complying with taxes will cost you a lot of money and a lot of time as well, which most businesses don't have.
Even learning how to pay those taxes is work in itself.
Precisely, it's a lot of itself.
Emmanuel Kipsang says, Badu owns the bank, sir. James Mwenda, that follows the doctrine of equality. You can't have different tax regimes for different people. All right. Livingston or Lakwal says, who will receive the COVID-19 vaccination earlier? These are very interesting people. There's someone here was at a question, Lacoste KE, saying, my question, what happens now when they reach the inelastic limit of taxation? What will happen now that Kenyan pockets have been overstrained by government taxation? Is revolution possible? Can Kenyans save themselves? Billow, you've been around long enough. Can you answer?
We've always said we're going to have a revolution, but it doesn't come. I think when you look at, maybe Kwame should tell you because he's in IEA, the number of levies, and forget about the taxes being introduced by the government in this country, from road levy, fuel levy, SGR as a levy, every little activity that they want to do, they put a levy. That's why when you look at the price of fuel, you would think that the 100 shillings is actually the cost of the fuel that we import. You'll be surprised that 100 shillings of petrol, 40 shillings is what goes to government, not just taxes. And, but so many other things, that they keep charging. You try to import something and you'll see what the government really charges. And they're still coming up with more. The other day I was reading about they want unemployment levy. They want...
soon they'll give us a walking day. But we have a levy.
So I think part of the challenge we have had is that as a society, as people, we have not been very... how would I put it? We have not aggressively fought some of these measures, even when they, deemed to be unconstitutional. For example, the minimum tax, which is a tax on capital, really, and which is raised now, is going to raise the level of inflation in this country, make things worse. Because what happens is that you pay 1% on turnover. Then if that's what the manufacturer pays, the one who's importing raw materials, the manufacturer, the distributor, the retailer, it's going to make the situation very bad. So if we have something like that, we should be, as businesses, as institutions, as people, able to go to court and challenge some of these things. And I think, forget about Parliament, even as Kenyans, we are not really very aggressive in terms of challenging some of the decisions, bad as they are. Because of I think to be fair, I think it's because of the dynamics, the politics in the country. Businesses want to, some of them get, like you said, kickbacks from government, and so they want to be seen on the good side of government. Nobody wants to be seen to offend government, and so we let some of these things go, and so is the ordinary Kenyan down there who goes to buy. The consumer who's paying the price, and this is why poverty levels don't go down. Half the population of this country is still living below the poverty line, despite the fact that we keep talking of nuclear energy. We have set up, we are doing everything. You would think we are really gone.
Supposed to send some balloons. We had the other balloons.
But you just need to get out of Nairobi a few kilometers, and you'll see the ordinary Kenyans, and life is completely different from what the government thinks, or what people in Nairobi think. So I think yes, there is going to be a limit. And I think Parliament should really help Kenyans and say no to more taxes, especially now when there's a pandemic. People have lost jobs. Businesses have collapsed. It's not the time to tax anywhere in the world. People are not increasing. Governments are waiving taxes to encourage people to spend, to encourage people to invest. This is the time to increase people so that businesses can rebound again. And so it's not about, no, we've lost money, I must raise money. And I think that is the unfortunate thing, and I hope they because we're going to go to the budget in the next few months, and we're very fearful. The way the government situation is today, it's like they will want more money. Yeah, they will need more taxes,
and more levies coming.
Of course,
more levies coming. Anyway, there's someone who has asked a very interesting question. I don't know if it falls into the economics, but Casper Omondi is asking, what is your take on wheelbarronomics as a contributor to public policy and contributor to production among the youth for now and future competitiveness?
Okay.
Well.